was part of the royal funerary estate because it does appear on several other objects from.
Okay, so we're going live. We live right now. We're going live.
Object that highlights these
Now,
trade connections.
I'm looking at this right here. And so we talk about wars at certain times, and products, and trade.
The kingdom of Meroe.
At one time,
Rome, as it was present, colonizing Egypt during this.
You had people colonize. Okay, see, we're gonna make a real description of things. Say for instance, you go in that jungle, right? And you found one of them wild beasts of the field, them wild things. You go get one of them wild things, you teach it, you house it. You know, you don't supposed to bring them things. You don't supposed to bring them things into the city and stuff. You hide it. You teach it. You teach it like a pet. Forgive me, I don't want to talk brash about things, but we just talk about some things for an overall aspect. And I don't mean to be rude.
I'm showing an image on the upper right of baboons worshiping the sun to make a reference to the baboon god Shu.
We have different references in different places.
This goddess from Nubia.
Where they were showing places of land, what was in that land at that time, what was being offered.
Associated with Nubian queens.
Because I'm looking at this thing talking about Nubia. No, it's talking about Nubian women. No, and it's talking about Hathor. It's talking about such an influential situation of understanding and overstanding of empowerment, right? Because when I was talking about empowerment of women.
Let's see. We have. Do we know what the specific usage of the ambulance that you have spoken about today?
No, I certainly don't. I have to imagine because they were interred with these queens, they're meant to have a protective function. They may well have been wrapped up in the burial of the queen's body, or perhaps placed around her body to serve in a protective fashion. You can see perhaps
because a lot of times they disturb me.
The goddess that I showed you,
as they talk about
with a lion head, they're supposed
the
to
concept,
okay,
of identity and of trade and of land. And they were showing like baboon worshiping the sun and all that stuff, right? So therefore, a depiction of a certain area. See, throughout trade and time and history and family, you hear about all these different places of the world and things of the world. So
yeah, certainly, I think because those
you had one time where we had institutions of learning all throughout the world. Just think of this. At one time, it was the institution of learning all throughout the world.
Change in the amount of water and the sort of natural landscape that would not support those type of animals further north in Egypt, but would
as we go back through the travel of history and time.
Likely to be living in the vicinity of Kerma. So if you even think back to the pre-dynastic period in Egypt, you can see
okay, now what did he just say? Pre-dynastic.
But then when the seasonal rains moved south again, those animals would have moved south with that shift in the seasonal rains.
They talk about so many different situations and things of animal patterns and movements of patterns of animals and all these things. See now, you had so many different things going on in so many different times and places that is not described about. I mean, even the largeness of, I mean, just the height of a person. At one time, do we understand that it was a height of people and stature of beings? We want to say beings. So when you have different stature of beings, well, at one time you say they was so-called people 20 foot, 50 foot tall. It was large people, giants, so-called they say, living. All these different animals, different degrees of animals. Even the animals at one time where it was on a distinction where animals, they say the animal was talking at one point in time. Because if you understand stuff, everything has what they say, even whatever exists right now has a percentage of human DNA in it. So-called human DNA. You know, they talk about dogs and like they have like 90%. You know, pigs and I mean all these things. So therefore, they were talking about not eating meat now because all these things were a part of you, right? So this is like the holy sacred thing of things of not eating meat at one point in time, because once you stop eating meat, that means that you really understand it. Okay, well, I know everything is a part of me in this world, and that thing was made out of my DNA. And you have a question like, dang, that thing was made out of my DNA. What? And so we go to a point of people saying that, oh man, these people are eating other humans. But if you're eating pigs, hogs, dogs, cats, fish, wow, you're saying that you're eating yourself. And so they make copies of fish. That when they say that they make copies of fish, copies of plants, but the plants and copies, it has your DNA in it, right? Seeds and everything. So if everything is part of your DNA for it to make and come to life, wow. Ingredients of things. Because what they say mythology and what's real is like it's a thin line.
And I love it because there's something so very powerfully feminine about this goddess that she is both. She's like kind of flip side.
They say at the beginning of time,
she is like this
the separation of the energy and the manifestation came first in flesh was woman. That's what they say now. I mean, we read through some things. It says the representation came in the feminine, and I ain't gonna say woman, but it was in a feminine aspect. There was a separation of feminine and the male. There was a separation of the aspect. Now, what it interpreted to, or what it created out of that energy field, right? There's just some thinking, and I'm not just saying that there's no God, and no, it's like bang, that's the Big Bang. I'm saying that that was the description of first creation, right? So out of that creation, the spark, and what became realization and what became solid,
comes from this very particular location in Nubia.
And what is real? What is illusion?
The Meroitic text that you had been, I guess that had been translated.
It's people that go so deep into understanding who they are, and well, they start feeling like, well, man, and they get their blood type back and say, oh man, oh, this blood type says that you're not this. I mean, and that's some actual fact that I mean, if they did so many different tests or whatever, and people say, well, okay, you made us out of you. We come from you out of an experiment, and we survived the experiment. Right? Right? That's something. So, you know, we start talking about that clone stuff again.
Comfortable using three different scripts: the Egyptian demonic, the Meroitic, and Greek. So even different language families, different scripts. But in their culture, I have to only imagine, since we don't have writing.
We start talking about trading.
Much more like a traditional African oral culture.
Everything was doing a trade or borrowing, or you know, everything was that already.
Didn't have their languages preserved.
Cousin Bob down the river.
In this late period in Meroe, they
Well, he He's down there in his spot.
based on the Egyptian hieroglyphs.
There was always
and
something like that,
Egyptian
like
demonic
that
script
person
that
it was in that
with
spot. It was led
hieroglyphs
to that
and then
spot.
this cursive script that you see on the screen. A British scholar from the early 20th century figured out what each letter stands for. So, like these two images together
You see that?
represent an A, this is a B, and so on. But it's still very difficult to.
They said the
translate
person
more
who
than
they took the person from Chicago to Egypt, and he knew the hieroglyphs. Hold up, man, I don't understand this thing.
Belongs to a completely different language family. Egyptian belongs to Afro-Asiatic that has like Egyptian, Hebrew, Arabic, and a bunch of other kind of North African languages. And this is from a different, more southern language family called Nilo-Saharan. And we just
All kind of language was made up as
know a lot of
messages
related
because people was
languages.
trading
Scholars working really hard to try to
someone else, and it was a
translate
secret transcript
which I
of
thought
a
I
message
was
of
my
everything,
dissertation. It's a bigger job than that.
of a watching.
Oh, darn. Somebody will get that.
Language was invented to keep secrets. Period.
Let's see. Thanks for the great presentation. Did the Nubian use of shanti, I'm saying that correctly,
Communication.
examples of which are in the exhibition, follow the Egyptian occupation, and what about the Nubian use of mummification?
Communication is a resistance. Is a force.
I believe that the way of Egyptian culture onto the
It's like the at the tailpipe. It's the exhaust. Talking exhausts. So whether there's noise pollution.
But the use of shwabtis, I believe, is adopted from the Egyptians, as is the practice of mummification. So we kind of see it not ever in Kerma, but yes, during.
Cause we start talking about wave patterns.
This new kingdom presence in Nubia, and then it sort of falls out of favor again during
wave patterns,
period when they kind of
frequencies,
their indigenous traditions, and then there's yet another period after Merowe.
If people was understanding about wave patterns and frequencies of movement and how to manipulate a wave, a pattern, a sound, and energy at one time.
All of those are Egyptian gods, but I'm 100% sure.
What do you feel?
Able to prove it that they're just assimilated to
because
whatever indigenous god or goddess.
You're digging up rocks and minerals and stuff out the ground and making microchips and all kind of things to hover and fly and produce energy, and you say things like they don't exist.
Someone wants to know when and who.
Powers don't exist.
There is a last Nubian queen. I think she
But you can make something that can go automatically without you even being in it. They make ships. Remote control. You can move things remote control, and you don't believe in power and energy that you have, that you possess.
No writing, very few grave goods, and so all that means is we don't have a name.
What do you believe in?
I'm trying to
What do you know?
Who's the last?
How do you know it?
One? I don't even want to embarrass.
I see a lot of people go to church and they read the Bible. I mean, whatever religion, it all says the same about it's a special power that you can connect to. And you can do wonderful, amazing things with this special power that you can connect to.
So you can just send me an email, Solange at.
Certain people have tapped into that power and was able to illustrate it and describe their power and put it into some kind of way to explain their power. But you say God and write the Bible.
Also, please register to join us on Thursday, July 22nd at noon to learn about
Isn't it so crazy that a whole bunch of words, all the words that's ever been put together, all can illustrate so many different parallels of things and so many identifications of how things are ran in your normal everyday life, your normal everyday upbringing, seeing, identifying things, going through situations. Is that amazing? Everyone has a different identification of things. And we start breaking everything down to like a simplest form, you start seeing like you actually see powers against power. Where it becomes to a point to where the power gets so strong to where you'll see the energy is positive and negative, and the transformation of it wants to rule. That's everything.
The Egyptians did not create family trees, so identifying blood relations can be difficult. Her mother was Ahmose, the principal wife of Thutmose I, but it is not known who Ahmose's parents were.
I was looking at these records, and people's interpretation of these records are things that they identified, or are they identifying or making, however you want to put it. Throughout whatever you see or however you transcribe it, the words and the identification of whatever being described is still something else out of that whole interpretation. And what is to be heard out of that? A description of the manipulation of people who was disagreeing, the trials and tribulation of attitudes and emotions.
She belonged to the 18th dynasty, which ran from 1507 BC to 1458 BC, and she ruled for over 2 decades, from 1478 BC to 1458 BC.
They were talking about companies.
3,500 years ago, and to put into
A lot of things were representing companies, trade routes, and where it came from and what it was representing and who they got from that. Who was the person over that route, or who was the person that knew how to be seen of it? Who represented it?
Little is known about Hatshepsut's childhood, but her name, which means almost of noble.
What is a Cleopatra? What is a Hatshepsut? These are titles of a land.
She is known to worship the cow goddess Hathor in particular, who was the goddess of love, beauty, music, dancing, fertility.
These are inventions right now that you hear
There were 42 state gods and goddesses
of identity, of knowledge, of understanding who they were and what they was. These were people fighting for rights. These were laws they were possessing of identity, of standing up, of putting people in check, in place.
To keep the royal bloodline pure. And so, at around the age of 12, she married her half-brother Thutmose II, becoming his principal wife. As Thutmose II was younger than Hatshepsut, she perhaps took over the reins of power in her husband's name when her father, Thutmose I, died in 1493
So
BC.
people trying to keep it in a bloodline of rulership, of secrets at one point in time. Because you couldn't let nobody know what you knew. So the secret had to be kept so stuffed and tightened to where, in order to gain any kind of control or keep anything going in a certain way, this is how you control people. Everything you hear was a government. These are how governments were first formed and started. Titles. Lords.
They had different protector goddesses. Nekhbet, the
and
ancient
goddesses,
in Upper Egypt,
way of
and
thinking.
Hathor, the cobra goddess in Lower Egypt. The regions were also represented by different symbols.
What animal is there, and the distinction of the animal, and represent the trails of themes.
In those periods when Upper and
What's the
Lower
agreement?
Egypt were united,
The agreement is the snake. Are you with the snake? Are you with that trail?
They were true golden ages. The first golden age occurred during the period of the Old Kingdom, 2649 BC to 2100 BC. This was the age of the pyramids. Disintegration and competing dynastic families brought this golden age to a
We'll talk about lands.
a period called the First Intermediate Period from 2181 BC to 2055 BC. The Middle Kingdom from
And so you have people doing acts and plays of your life over and over and over, reenactments. Because the only thing they knew was you made these things. And there was some follies going on, right? It was some manipulation of what wasn't supposed to go on. It was hidden.
The next two dynasties, which overlapped, proved weak. The 13th dynasty was forced.
Everything was been a trade of secrets. Anything.
Failed to prevent a breakaway dynasty forming. The breakaway
Then they say national security.
reigned separately over the Nile Delta.
National security is protecting the fraud
The second intermediate
of something that's going on, or
50 BC,
the rulership of something.
50 BC, which followed.
So we all have different national security.
In the north, the Hyksos dynasty arrived from Western Asia, and its 6 kings ruled.
We say the Hyksos, Western Asia, right? Western Asia.
An early civilization in the region of Nubia, northern Sudan,
Nubia.
expanded its reach. In the middle sat the Egyptian kingdom of Thebes.
So you had a whole bunch of families that was dispersing their people everywhere, and they took up on a trade, and they learned this trade, and also learned this trade through their trade. They got other ideas of ways to incorporate their trade to different people, and if that trade worked, then that secret and that little token of appreciation was formed and made, manifested.
And united Upper and Lower Egypt at the start of the Middle Kingdom too, also triggering a golden age. In reunifying the country, Ahmose became the founder of the New Kingdom and the first king of the 18th dynasty, to which Hatshepsut also belonged. As the period of foreign rule in Egypt came to an end, Egypt began to build up its own empire. During the second intermediate
You always hear about foreign rule. Foreign rule. What is foreign rule? You incorporate another company. It's not from the homeland. Your cousin is foreign to this land. Y'all had the same bloodline. And they're taking over your operation in your other land, country, saying that it's you. When it's really your territory, really your place.
As well as her father, Thutmose I, Hatshepsut was a blood relation of Ahmose I, the unified.
Now, if you made things out of your DNA and your blood, your chemicals, there's certain things that belongs to you. Because we start talking about things that go farther. They were talking about all these wars where at one point in time people were, you know, it was family. So you just come here. If you need this type of material, you'll send a group. Hey, go over here and go get this from down there. Tell them we need this much. And sending them some stuff for getting that. We're going to send them a peace offering and a gift. Oh, if somebody from where they from made something and they're going to show you what they made out of it. We got some people working on some things to try to see how different these chemicals react, or how we find out how these react. What we can do with these things. Like we call scientists right now. People in laboratories. That has always been here. Manufacturing.
Issue was that sons born to secondary wives wives and any female children were not considered ideal heirs. Thutmose I and his principal wife, Ahmose, had no surviving son, only 2 daughters, of whom Hatshepsut was the oldest. Thutmose I did have a son, Thutmose II, with a secondary wife, Mutnofret, and it was thought best, according to tradition, that Thutmose II be quickly married to his half-sister Hatshepsut. This would bolster the credentials of Thutmose II and preserve the direct royal line. Egyptologists
Company ownership and land
presented Thutmose
disbursements.
II as weak and frail. This presentation was not necessarily rooted in fact. It was fueled by a determination to present Hatshepsut as domineering. A shrewd Hatshepsut was supposed to have manipulated her ineffective husband and essentially ruled in his name. However, public monuments paint a different picture. A dutiful Hatshepsut is shown standing behind her husband, showing appropriate fealty to him as the pharaoh. But the limited scale of Thutmose II's building program hinders a deeper understanding of his reign and the power his wife held. Thutmose II ruled only for a short time after his father's death. He was succeeded by his wife and half-sister Hatshepsut. For the same reason, he himself had almost been passed over, the lack of a son born of the principal wife. Just like his father, Thutmose II did have a son with a secondary wife,
Okay.
Isis. This child, Thutmose III, could not
We get back on board.
take the throne because he was very young. And like with the accession of Thutmose II, there was some concern over the child's status as the son of a secondary wife. The weakening of the direct royal line was a concern that could not be easily overlooked. Instead, as tradition indicated, Hatshepsut was to rule as co-regent for the young boy, a role which soon grew to that of a co-ruler. There had been precedents of widowed principal wives ruling as regents and dutifully handling the affairs of the government for their young sons, but the short lifespan of ancient Egyptians, rulers, and the requirement for regents was not unusual. And Hatshepsut's royal credentials as both daughter and wife of past pharaohs were unimpeachable.
I mess with the weather so much.
Was recognized as king from the beginning of his co-regent period, which ran from 1478 BC to 1473 BC.
You wonder why they mess with the weather.
Showed the child king in the
They were saying about the weather.
as was traditional, performing royal duties.
They been telling you about how they're going to use it as a tool.
Dressed in royal female garb, is depicted off to one side, demurely watching.
Have you ever went from one place and went to another place and understood that dang, the way you breathe, the way your blood cells act, the way your temperature is. Wow, this elevation. It's like I'm up high. I can't breathe good. The earth's not like where I'm from. I'm used to this atmosphere. But this atmosphere, you can tell that your body react different. You can go from one place to another place and have high blood pressure. Have all kind of sicknesses and everything because of your elevation and where you're from and the type of air that you're breathing and how your body reacts to the air.
This was a permanent promotion.
A lot of people don't even realize that.
Moses came of age, as the role of pharaoh was a lifelong responsibility. Pharaohs could not abdicate or rule temporarily. But even at this time, when her power was at its height, she ruled as a co-ruler with Thutmose III. The reasons behind Hatshepsut's decision to...
So we're talking about electricity and how electricity runs out there in there, out of wires or whatever, conducted. But it comes out there. The rocks out your ground. For everything that you operate on right now, you're doing it through some kind of energy, electrical. That you think of, where you say that, electrical. Actually, it's just you running it. It's just your energy. But we're going to go through something else. It's your energy that's running this wave. You are the wave.
But a political crisis, Perhaps a threat from an alternative branch of the royal family forced her hand.
Now, don't get me wrong. Everyone doesn't have that way. Everybody doesn't have that energy or
Because he wasn't her son.
tapped into it.
His own mother, Isis,
Some people ignore
was
the energy,
unable to take on
so they don't believe it's real.
because she had no royal blood.
Senses.
Between her own gender,
Like they say, your spidey senses.
and his limited legitimacy as the son of a secondary wife, Hatshepsut's options for establishing stable rule.
What do you know? What information do you
In
obtain?
the end, she was the best place to rule as the
What information do you obtain?
wife of two pharaohs and the holder of
You have a war against the information that you have obtained.
The title of God's wife of Amun had given
When we say know who you are,
before her elevation to co-
understand what you are.
It was this title that won her the support of the priests.
A lot of people
The God's wife
don't want you to know who you are
to the god Amun,
and don't want you to find out what you are
the Egyptian gods who was later merged with the ancient sun god
and how much power you have.
had assisted the high priest in his sacred duties at the great temple of Amun at Karnak. She was held in high regard because it was believed
You have people making petitions on stopping your inalienable rights.
as the creator god.
People trying to tell you where you can't go and what you can't do,
God's wife had enough influence
but they want to live up under a rule where
as ancient
they overstand it. They want to be able to do that. They have their inalienable rights,
Hatshepsut was the last God's wife.
but they have signed terms of agreements to distract them from having it.
And wealth on the woman who held this title. Hatshepsut's experience
We have all been victim of that.
and working closely with the priests stood her in good stead.
We have all been victim of trickery
As well as leading religious processions and festivals
on so many forms and levels
divine responsibility.
of people that was taught,
Saw their pharaohs as a link between the gods and the human race. Pharaohs would
and then no other way but the trickery. And as they grew and find out that there was other levels, they was disturbed. They was tricked into going through that process
In many cases, pharaohs
when they didn't know that they could terminate their contract at any time, because
with some believed to be born of Amun-Ra,
if any trickery going on in the contract,
and when they died would become fully fledged
they'll mess you around
beings. As
and
with
stop
the
you
support of the
from
priests,
living
Hatshepsut
freely.
relied on the favor of the royal family and
Anything that hurts you or harms you.
arguments that the cunning
They
Hatshepsut
harm a lot of
sought
people
to overthrow her stepson
daily.
and rule alone are undermined by the fact that the ancient Egyptian royal family relied on the support of other elite groups. The risk of being overthrown would have reminded Hatshepsut that she was answerable to others. It seems likely that the courtiers, as well as the priests, supported Hatshepsut's rise to power.